5 years into our marriage, my husband still resented me for causing his first love, his white moonlight, to become a vegetable. He never stepped into my room, never spoke to me. He relentlessly turned our childhood sweetheart relationship into a publicly known miserable couple. Until one day, I received a desperate text from my husband. Ava, sudden avalanche. My legs are crushed and I'm buried in a cave. Can you come save me? Without hesitation, I took the search and rescue dog and entered the mountain, digging through the vast snowfield until my fingers were bloody. In the end, I froze to death. After death, I returned to my husband's side, only to see him embracing the awakened white moonlight and sneering mockingly. Ava is better off freezing into a vegetable too, to repay Serafina's debt. But after learning of my death, he clutched our wedding ring and cried, his eyes red. I curled up, my body freezing in the snow, and closed my eyes forever. The moment my soul left, I heard Julian's disdainful snicker. Ava is afraid of death. How could she possibly risk her life in an avalanche to find me? Seeing him safe and sound, I reached out to touch his face, but my fingers passed through without any resistance. Julian's brothers were laughing and talking in a private room. A delicate female voice pierced my ears and I froze. Sorry to keep you waiting, everyone. Turning around, I saw Serafina walking in, wearing a white dress. Julian possessively took the girl's hand. His infatuated and loving expression was something I had never seen in our 5 years of marriage. Serafina bent her knees to sit, but Julian wrapped his arms around her waist and lifted her onto his lap. The seat is cold, and you haven't fully recovered. Serafina smiled gently, continuing the previous topic. Were you guys betting on whether Ava would go to the snow mountain to find Julian? I bet she would. After all, she and Julian are childhood sweethearts, and she went to great lengths to marry him. She must be deeply in love. Julian stroked Serafina's earlobe with his finger. She made you a vegetable for 5 years, and forced me to marry her through owing me a debt of gratitude. I wish she had never saved me. My heart suddenly stabbed with pain, and I acutely sensed the deep disgust in Julian's words. Serafina raised an eyebrow triumphantly, and placed a finger on Julian's lips, saying coyly, Ava would be heartbroken if she heard that. She just loves you too much. Julian's brothers grimaced and shrugged. I floated in midair, a bitter smile on my lips. Suddenly, anxious barking echoed from the doorway. The familiar sound made my heart tremble, and I happily floated over to hug Buddy. When the avalanche came, I hadn't found Julian yet, and I was worried Buddy would die. I ordered it to go down the mountain to find the search and rescue team, and only closed my eyes and died in peace after watching it move away from the snow mountain. Fortunately, it was safe and sound. Julian squatted down and rubbed Buddy's head, speaking in a puzzled tone. Buddy is inseparable from Ava. How could it be here alone? Julian looked up and surveyed the surroundings, but didn't see my figure. Just as he was about to make a call to ask, Serafina gently tugged on his sleeve. Julian, I'm most afraid of dogs. Julian patted her hand soothingly, and sneered coldly. It seems Ava knows you've woken up and deliberately sent Buddy to scare you. Buddy wagged its tail frantically, biting Julian's pant leg and dragging him outside. During this, it accidentally brushed against Serafina's calf. She cried out in pain and collapsed to the ground, tears of grievance falling. Buddy, how could you scratch me with your claws? Julian kicked Buddy away with force, anxiously checking Serafina's wound. Buddy screamed miserably, crashing heavily into the coffee table. My heart felt like it was being tightly squeezed by an invisible hand, aching so much I couldn't breathe. Several red marks appeared on Serafina's fair calf. The others disgustedly slammed their wine glasses heavily on Buddy, cursing viciously. You mutt, how dare you touch Julian's precious darling? Daring to hurt Serafina, skinning you alive would be too good for you. Buddy whimpered in pain, scrambling to hide in a corner. Every time it moved a step, Serafina screamed. I anxiously stood in front of Buddy, explaining. Buddy is a search and rescue dog, it wouldn't hurt anyone. I pleaded, looking at Julian, but I was met with the cold killing intent in his eyes. Buddy's miserable howls echoed through the private room as Julian swung a wine bottle and smashed it hard on its head. I collapsed, kneeling at Julian's feet, trying to protect Buddy with my body. But the sharp shards of the wine bottle passed through my body, scratching Buddy. Blood spread, Buddy's huge body convulsing wildly. My mind went blank. I numbly pressed close to Buddy's heart, watching helplessly as the blood flowed to my feet. Julian disgustedly wiped the blood from his hands with a wet wipe and carried the frightened Serafina in his arms. He casually instructed the people beside him. Call Ava. If she can't control her own dog, someone else will have to discipline it for her. Serafina shed fake tears, looking pitifully downcast. Buddy is Ava's favorite. She'll definitely be angry when she finds out. Mentioning me, Serafina's shoulders trembled violently, as if she was very afraid of me. Julian lovingly kissed her forehead. Don't be afraid, I won't let her bully you again. I knelt in the blood-soaked ground, tears falling uncontrollably. Buddy's left leg still had the red rope of peace that Julian had personally braided. We had picked it up from under a bridge, and it had long been a family member. Just last week, Julian was talking about finding Buddy a partner to play with. I bit the flesh in my mouth, but I still couldn't stop myself from crying. The cleaner roughly picked up Buddy's body and threw it into the trash can. Buddy's body was piled together with fruit peels, the foul smell attracting countless flies. But I couldn't hold it in my arms, and I was only pulled back to Julian's side by an invisible force. I clenched my fists and punched Julian hard in the chest. Julian, do you have any conscience? If it wasn't for Buddy and me searching in the snow for 3 days and 3 nights, would you still be alive? To dig through the thick snowdrifts, Buddy wore down its right paw, and I suffered damage from the cold entering my body, making me infertile for life. The Mo couple watched me grow up, and had long decided that I was the Mo family's daughter-in-law. Learning that I had selflessly saved Julian, they used Serafina's medical expenses to force him to marry me. Julian and I were tied together like this. But there was a rift in our relationship. He hated that I didn't save his white moonlight Serafina first, causing her to become a vegetable. Even more, he hated that I forced him to marry me, cutting off his desire to remain celibate for Serafina. A strong, bloody taste rose in my throat, and my eyes were misty. Julian, I regret saving you. 8 hours have passed since the bet. Julian drove Serafina back to the villa. The nanny greeted them, and when she didn't see me, she asked, puzzled, "Huh? Young master, why didn't Madame come back with you? Didn't she go to the snow mountain to find you?" I saw Julian's back stiffen, and he raised his head in disbelief. You said she went to the snow mountain? Without waiting for the nanny to answer, he sneered to himself. It's just you who love to play along with her. With that, he carried Serafina to the master bedroom. Serafina's eyes were tinged with red, and she charmingly hooked her arms around Julian's neck. Julian, everyone is saying Ava went to the snow mountain now. I won the bet. You have to go with me to the snow mountain to complete our unfinished wedding. Buddy's death tore a deep wound in my heart, hurting so much that I couldn't think. But Julian's sincere nod crushed my heart even more. In his heart, I was never his wife, just a sinner who ruined his love with his white moonlight. Tears streamed down my face. I closed my eyes and covered my ears, refusing to hear the ambiguous breathing or see the intertwined bodies. Julian tirelessly murmured Serafina's name over and over again, smashing her gasps into pieces. I stared blankly at the ridiculous wedding photo on the bedside table. The clumsy Photoshop traces were like a loud slap, shattering my dream of a loving life with Julian. 5 years ago, Julian ran away from the wedding in front of everyone, leaving me alone to face the guests. Everyone in the city laughed at me, saying I used despicable means and tried my best to marry into the Mo family, but couldn't even see Julian's face. My relatives felt ashamed and left the banquet in embarrassment. My father felt sorry for me and had a car accident and died while chasing after Julian. The Lin family went bankrupt overnight. Their assets were divided up, and they owed astronomical debts. My mother was so stimulated that she became mentally ill, breaking down and trying to commit suicide every few days. My body trembled violently, and I huddled in a corner, regretfully slapping myself. It's all my fault. If I hadn't insisted on marrying Julian, none of this tragedy would have happened. After a satisfying and uninhibited lovemaking session, Serafina leaned in Julian's arms, choosing a wedding dress. Julian casually liked a fishtail dress that could be used as a toast dress. Serafina frowned and acted spoiled. Julian, I hate fishtail dresses the most. She unliked it and mumbled as she swiped the screen. Julian, however, absent-mindedly lit a cigarette. Fishtail dresses are my favorite. My thoughts drifted back to when I was 18. At that time, Julian hadn't met Serafina yet, and his heart and eyes were only on me. He accurately remembered my menstrual cycle, helped me get hot water and buy heating pads, and asked the teacher to change his seat, so he could be my desk mate. When the cool breeze blew, Julian would always lovingly tuck my hands into his hot abdomen, asking gently, "Does your stomach still hurt?" I nodded shyly, but he teased me. "You're going to be my wife in the future. Why are you still shy?" Everyone in the class knew that Julian was madly in love with me. When we graduated, they even told me to make sure to invite them to drink wedding wine when I married Julian. Unfortunately, childhood sweethearts couldn't compare to love at first sight. Julian transferred his affections and fell in love with Serafina. When the sky was slightly bright, Julian went to the kitchen to find the nanny. Today is Ava's first day of her period. Help her boil a bowl of brown sugar ginger tea. The nanny pursed her lips and sighed softly. "Young master, madam hasn't come back yet." Julian frowned irritably, and when he saw the calendar on the wall, he suddenly remembered that today was the day to visit my mother in the mental hospital. He picked up the car keys and started the engine. I stared at Julian's suppressed and displeased eyebrows. I couldn't understand if there was any place for me in his heart. Just as the car was about to start, Serafina came out in slippers. She sniffed in the cold wind, and the car immediately stalled. Julian got out of the car and took off his coat with pity to wrap her up. Serafina shed pitiful tears, hugged his neck and complained, "I woke up from a nightmare just now and didn't see you. Do you know how scared I was? I was really afraid that I would never see you again, like when I fainted in the snow." Julian's heart suddenly softened. He gently carried Serafina back to the room, carefully dressing her. I stood by the bed, watching the noble young master put on socks and comb Serafina's hair. The former Julian would also take care of me like this. He smiled dotingly and called me princess, but was still willing to wash my little dresses. The pearl bracelet on my wrist shimmered slightly. That was a birthday gift that Julian had personally picked, polished each pearl, and injured his 10 fingers to give to me. For 10 years, I had never taken it off. But now it was covered in blood, and I couldn't wipe it clean no matter what. Julian took Serafina to the mental hospital. When he pushed open the door, I saw my mother smiling while holding the doll I gave her. The nurse closed the fairy tale book and greeted politely, "Mr. Julian, hello." Serafina saw the necklace on my mother's neck, and her eyes lit up instantly. "Julian, isn't that the necklace you gave me when we went to the Maldives before? I couldn't find it after I woke up, so it's here." I didn't miss the resentment in Serafina's eyes. Her sharp fingernails deeply pinched my mother's flesh, and then my mother's shrill screams rang out in the ward. "Bad woman, it hurts, don't touch me." Serafina pouted aggrievedly and looked to Julian for help. "That's the token of your love for me. Ava must have stolen it on purpose." Julian glanced at the necklace on my mother's neck, and the familiar shape made him frown involuntarily. I threw myself in front of Julian and shouted with all my strength, "This is not Serafina's, this is what my dad gave to my mom, it's her last memento." No one could hear me. Julian rudely tore off my mother's necklace, carefully wiped it clean, and handed it to Serafina. Serafina's wrinkled little face finally relaxed into a smile, and she happily asked Julian to put it on for her. My mother collapsed and climbed off the bed, grabbing Serafina's hair tightly and reaching out to grab the necklace. "Give it back to me, Alan gave it to me. That's mine." While the two were pulling, Serafina tried her best to push my mother away. My mother lost her balance and staggered backward, falling out of the half-height window. The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground exploded in my ears. My heart felt like it had been struck by a heavy hammer. "Mom." The nurse was frightened and her face turned pale, and she quickly pressed the emergency bell. Julian led Serafina away, cursing in a low voice. A family of lunatics. He didn't ask about my whereabouts anymore. After all, in his eyes, me disappearing was just a tantrum, and I would eventually crawl back to him shamefaced. Serafina triumphantly stroked the necklace around her neck, hooking Julian's arm and acting coquettish. "I heard the Snow Mountain wedding venue is all set up. Let's go take a look." The car turned around and headed straight for the snow mountain. My fingernails dug deeply into my palm. Julian, if you really knew I was dead, would you regret everything you've done? I followed beside Julian, and when I looked up, I saw a sea of pink roses. In the midst of the pure white snow, it was like a fairyland. Serafina ran through the snow, happily calling Julian's name. But Julian's heart felt inexplicably tense and uneasy, as if something bad was about to happen. He stumbled over something in his absent-mindedness. A wedding ring rolled out, the dazzling light of the diamond especially striking in the snow. Julian's fingers trembled as he picked up the ring, his gaze fixed on the initials engraved on the inside. I had engraved them myself after the wedding. Julian staggered to his feet, his voice hoarse as he questioned Serafina. Serafina, you said you saw Ava hiding in the hotel. Is that true? A flicker of barely perceptible guilt flashed in the woman's eyes. Then she quickly nodded. Of course it's true. Don't you believe me? Serafina took Julian's hand and shook it coquettishly, blinking her innocent eyes. Julian clenched the wedding ring in his hand. He comforted himself that Ava must have secretly put it in his pocket out of anger. I scoffed. Ever since Julian reluctantly put the wedding ring on my finger under pressure from his parents, I hadn't been willing to take it off. Even the last time Julian misunderstood that I deliberately stopped Serafina's medical expenses and brutally broke my finger. The doctor told me that not removing the ring could hinder the healing of the wound and lead to amputation. I didn't even think about taking it off. Julian took out his phone to send me a message. But as soon as he sent one, an eye-catching red exclamation mark appeared. Last week, Serafina showed signs of waking up, and Julian, fearing she would be angry after waking up, coldly and ruthlessly blocked all my contact information. No wonder I couldn't get through to Julian's phone, and couldn't send any messages for help after entering the snow mountain. Serafina intertwined fingers with Julian, and ran towards the center of the pink roses. A delicate veil fluttered in the wind and snow. Julian, I've waited 5 years for this day. Quick, help me put it on, and once it's on, I'll be your most beloved bride. The word bride deeply stung Julian's heart. He subconsciously shook off Serafina's hand, and the image of Ava smiling appeared in his mind. Friends arrived one after another after receiving the wedding notification, and the deserted snowy ground immediately became filled with joy. A man patted Julian on the shoulder, and took a thick red envelope out of his pocket. Julian, congratulations on finally marrying your beloved White Moonlight. 5 years of a long-distance romance, finally a successful ending. Serafina's face was flushed, and she shyly buried herself in Julian's arms. I saw Julian frowning almost imperceptibly, coldly pushing Serafina away. He unconsciously rubbed the wedding ring on his finger and said softly, Ava is my wife. The air fell into silence. Serafina's originally rosy complexion instantly turned pale, and she raised her voice incredulously. Julian, what do you mean by this? I floated in midair, watching Julian distantly distance himself from Serafina. His thin lips moved slightly. Serafina, promising you to complete the wedding we didn't finish back, then was just to make up for regrets. I'm already married to Ava. These 5 years I've neglected her and ignored her, which has already made her repay the harm you suffered. After today, I will return to a loving married life with Ava and stay by each other's side forever. Hearing Julian's words, I laughed tears of blood. He felt sorry for Serafina being hurt and slaughtered, but he condoned Serafina taking away the last memento Dad left for Mom, causing her to fall downstairs and get injured. Julian destroyed everything I cherished, and in the end he wanted to end it with a light-hearted sentence, I will live a good life with her in the future. Who cares about his charity like love? I just want my buddy. I just want my whole family to be safe. Tears flowed like a flood, and I cried until I was exhausted. Serafina stared blankly at Julian's departing figure. At this moment, the piercing sound of police sirens broke the silence. The search and rescue team surrounded the wedding venue, and the warning red line circled the entire area. Julian recognized the man standing in the front row, my colleague Noah. Maybe even he himself didn't know that his voice was low and trembling. Why isn't Ava with you guys? Noah raised his fist and slammed it into Julian, and the two of them fell into the snow in a mess. I shed tears, watching Noah's eyes turn red as he grabbed Julian's collar and roared. How dare you mention Ava? This search and rescue mission is to find Ava's body. Julian, you killed her. When I learned that Julian might have encountered an avalanche, I couldn't wait to set off with the search and rescue team. I entered the snow mountain alone. There was not a single soul in the vast snow, and my hands and feet gradually froze, losing sensation. I fell into the heavy snow due to hypothermia and made 99 calls to Julian. As long as he told me he was safe and sound, I would still have the strength to climb out of the snow mountain. But the phone never went through, and I lost all contact with Julian. But I was afraid that he would really be buried in the snow mountain and be lonely on the road to the underworld. Before I died, I edited a message and sent it to Noah. I asked him to be sure to rescue Julian. Julian's shoulders trembled violently, and fear spread in his eyes. So he too was afraid of my death? Impossible. Ava didn't even enter the snow mountain. She's just throwing a tantrum and hiding from me. Noah gritted his teeth and punched Julian a few more times until he vomited blood in a mess before barely stopping. Serafina rushed over distressed and pushed Noah away. What right do you have to hit someone? Julian tightly grasped Serafina's hand, looking at her pleadingly, longing for the certainty that I had not entered the snow mountain. Didn't you say that Ava was hiding in the hotel and throwing a tantrum with me, and didn't enter the snow mountain? Is what Noah said really true? Friends flocked over, nonchalantly saying, Ava would only hinder your and Serafina's fairy tale love. Does it really matter whether she lives or dies? Before the man could finish speaking, Julian knocked him down with a heavy punch. That wedding ring rolled out again. Julian chased after it madly. Seeing his distraught appearance, I felt an unspeakable pleasure in my heart. Julian, so you can feel pain too. So you're afraid of losing me. The ring finally stopped rolling. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept in, stirring the white snow. Noah's pupils constricted, and he saw a section of wrist sticking out of the snow. On the inside of the wrist, there was a familiar iris tattoo. Search dogs barked wildly, chasing after Julian in unison. Julian clutched the ring tightly in his hand, regained after losing it. But Noah lost control and pushed him away, fair fingers spreading crimson across the thick snow. I grabbed Noah's hand worriedly. Don't dig with your bare hands, you'll get hurt. All the search dogs surrounded that small patch of snow. The rescue team swung shovels where the search dogs barked incessantly. A goose yellow jacket appeared in everyone's sight. Julian seemed to be paused, his gaze fixed on the iris embroidery on the jacket. When I was 20, he accidentally burned a hole in my new clothes while smoking. I cried holding the blackened spot, complaining in tears that Julian had ruined my favorite new clothes. Julian secretly learned to mend clothes from an old master, and embroidered my favorite irises on the hole. The body buried in the snow gradually revealed its full appearance. Julian roared in pain, his fingers trembling as he brushed the snow from my face. He gently poked my cheek, and held me in his arms with deep affection. Ava, are you playing hide and seek with me? I found you, you win. Why aren't you talking? Tears streamed down uncontrollably. When Julian and I were little, we loved to play hide and seek. He could always pinpoint my location, and take out my favorite orange-flavored lollipop from his pocket. When I was tired of playing and refused to walk, Julian would carry me home on his back. Julian drove away everyone surrounding me, struggled to carry me on his back, and whispered gently, Ava, I'll take you home. Acid churned in my stomach. I was disgusted by Julian's hypocritical affection, and struggled to push myself off his back. But my hand passed right through Julian's shoulder. Serafina anxiously blocked Julian's path, tears streaming down her face. Julian, you can't leave, our wedding isn't over yet. She stubbornly raised her neck. But Julian ignored her, and walked right past her. A friend complained and stopped Julian. Julian, you were the one who lied in the first place, telling Ava you were trapped in the snow mountain. You almost died in the snow mountain before. Don't you know the power of an avalanche? Ava is dead as you wished. Why are you putting on this show of deep affection? While Julian was stunned, Noah picked up my body and held it in his arms. Dozens of search dogs bared their fangs at Julian, not allowing him to take another step forward. Julian could only watch as Noah carried me away. But my soul was still unable to be free, and could only follow Julian. He went home dejectedly, and the housekeeper came with a steaming cup of brown sugar ginger tea. She didn't see my figure again and couldn't help but sigh. "Young master, why hasn't madam come home with you yet? Girls are like that, she'll be fine with a little coaxing." The corners of Julian's eyes turned red, and his nails pierced his palm. Blood dripped onto the ground. As if remembering something, Julian quickly dialed the number of the pet hospital. "Is Buddy's wound bandaged?" A confused male voice came from the speaker. "Mr. Julian, didn't you call later and tell us not to go?" The air became silent. Julian's chest heaved violently, and he could no longer restrain himself, his tone becoming violent. "Who the hell told you not to go?" "That's my wife's beloved dog. She'll be heartbroken if it's injured or sick." Hearing Julian affectionately call me wife, I couldn't help but gag. When he was swinging his fists at Buddy, did he not think I would be sad? When he allowed Serafina to put on a show and falsely accuse Buddy of injuring her, did he not think that Buddy was a child we raised together? For 6 years Julian and Buddy ate and lived together. How could he not know that it was gentle-natured? I raised my hand to wipe away my tears, watching Julian smash the treasures on the curio shelves like a madman, watching him hysterically order the people at the pet hospital to pull up the call records. I leaned over to look at that familiar string of numbers, and a mocking smile crept onto my face. It was Serafina. The door was pushed open with a snap. Serafina's eyelids were slightly red, as if she had suffered a great injustice. Not allowing Julian to question her, she sobbed pitifully. "How could you leave me alone? Julian, you promised to marry me. You said I was the love of your life." The veins on Julian's forehead bulged, and he reached out and squeezed Serafina's neck tightly. The necklace hit the back of his hand, and the dim light illuminated the numbers on it. 1983. Ting. 21 inch. As if burned, Julian released his hand and slapped himself in the face in a breakdown. He finally realized what a bastard thing he had done. Serafina hurriedly hid the jade pendant in her sweater, pretending nothing had happened, and went to grab Julian's hand. Julian shook her hand away in disgust. "Serafina, this necklace isn't yours, is it? You lied and deceived me. You pushed Ava's mother down the stairs. She'll be sad when she comes back." I sat quietly on the bed, admiring Julian's ugly, broken-down state. His tears fell like broken pearls, hitting the wedding ring with a asterisk plop, plop, asterisk. He was still muttering softly. "Ava will be angry, that was her last family member. She won't forgive me." The housekeeper rushed in, pale-faced, holding a phone. "Young master, the news reports that madam is dead." The news was reporting my death. I leaned over to the phone, and rows of comments flew across my eyes. "Ava is the strongest person in the rescue team. How could she die? She took me down the mountain just a few days ago. I don't believe she's dead." Sob, sob, sob. "Ava is the living map of the snow mountain. Every time we go to the snow mountain to study the terrain, she leads the way." The comment section was full of rest in peace. My eyes stung as I watched the people I had once rescued laying flowers at my tombstone, offering their condolences. Mom appeared in the video, only sporting minor abrasions on her face and otherwise unharmed. The enormous weight lifted from my chest. It was wonderful that Mom was all right. She hugged my tombstone and cried until she fainted. Even the nurse couldn't help but shed tears. Everyone in the video had red eyes. Julian stared intently at the gray photograph on the tombstone, biting his lip until it bled. The reporter introduced my life story, playing an interview clip. I was beaming with happiness in the video. The reporter asked gently, "Ms. Ava, what was your initial motivation for becoming a snow mountain rescuer?" I raised my hand, showing off the wedding ring on my ring finger to the camera, and smiled sweetly. "The snow mountain is where my husband and I fell in love. When I was 19, he carried me out of the snow-covered mountains, giving me a second life." Julian clearly remembered this event. After high school graduation, he asked me what gift I wanted. I said I wanted to see the snow mountain. Julian did his research, found a guide, and took me to set off. Unfortunately, my health was poor, and I developed severe altitude sickness not long after we started. The guide was afraid of causing a death, and ran away without a word. Julian stumbled and fell several times, and I cried and told him to leave me. But he stubbornly carried me on his back. You're going to be my wife. How can I leave you? Julian stared at the vibrant Ava in the video, a pained roar escaping his throat. He clenched the wedding ring in his palm tightly. Serafina gently hugged him, comforting him. Julian, you still have me. I won't leave you. I will always be with you. But Julian pushed Serafina away violently, roaring in heart-wrenching anguish. But I only want Ava. Serafina lost her balance and fell to the ground, her phone rolling to Julian's feet. The screen was unlocked, displaying a photo with the Eiffel Tower in the background. In the picture, Serafina was leaning on a foreign man's shoulder, a happy smile reaching her eyes. The timestamp read June 1st, 2023. At that time, Serafina was a vegetable, lying in the hospital, kept alive by nutrients. Serafina endured the pain and snatched back the phone, desperately trying to explain. Before she could even open her mouth, Julian grabbed her chin in a rage, forcing her to answer. What's the meaning of the date in the photo? Who is that man? Since Serafina accepted Julian's proposal, the two had been inseparable, like Siamese twins. There was almost no secret or personal space. I saw Serafina's face gradually turning red, frantically hitting Julian's arm. Let go. Julian immediately called to retrieve the hospital's surveillance footage. The hospital, knowing they couldn't hide it, begged Julian not to take his anger out on them. Miss Serafina was actually fine back then. She gave the hospital $20 million to lie and say she became a vegetable. Julian smashed the phone in a fit of rage, snatched Serafina's phone, and flipped through her photo album. Waves, beaches, sunshine, and countless faces of strange men. Serafina was ending one relationship after another, while he had tormented Ava for 5 years. Julian collapsed, releasing Serafina's hand, and pressed the bell to call security. Lock her in the basement, don't give her any food. Serafina's screams echoed in my ears. I watched expressionlessly as she was stuffed into a dog cage and thrown into the pitch-black basement. Serafina humbly begged Julian to listen to her explanation. And Julian collapsed in despair, sitting on the ground, entering the password to open the safe on the bedside table. My heart skipped a beat. The password was my birthday. Julian took out a yellowed diary, filled with his love for me. His finger stopped on the day he and Serafina had the accident. There was a deeply carved word, hate, on the page. A harsh ripping sound filled the air. Julian tore the page, crying like a child. Tears soaked the diary, the writing blurring and smearing. I coldly stared at Julian's distraught appearance, laughing with delight. My body was gradually becoming transparent. I would soon disappear. Julian didn't dare to go out, nor did he allow anyone in the villa to mention my death. He clutched the wedding ring all day, drinking heavily and weeping. Serafina had both her legs broken. Julian wouldn't allow the doctor to treat her injuries, only keeping her alive. One night, Julian suddenly had Serafina put in the trunk. I floated in front of Serafina, watching her kowtow pathetically, begging Julian to let her go. Julian, I didn't mean to kill her. I didn't know that in Ava's heart, you were more important than her life. Although you lost Ava, I will always be with you. Don't you want to be with me forever? Julian curled his lips in disdain, picking up a rag and stuffing it into Serafina's mouth. His eyes couldn't hide his sorrow and pain. The person I truly wanted to be with forever was Ava. You were just a novelty, just for fun. I felt guilty for causing you to become a vegetable, and deliberately tormented Ava to offset the guilt in my heart. But you lied to me, lied to Ava. Julian's eyes were frighteningly red, tears streaming down his face. But soon he adjusted his emotions and wiped away his tears. It doesn't matter, let's both go down and atone to Ava. The car started, Julian silently driving towards the snow mountain. Before we got married, he asked me where I wanted to settle down. I told him to find a city near the snow mountain, so that we could go to the snow mountain to make wishes every year. To grow old together in every snowfall. I quietly stared at Julian's profile, glancing sideways at the majestic snow mountain outside the window. For him and Serafina to die here would only taint this sacred land. The blood flowing from Serafina's legs stained the snow red. She crawled outwards with her hands and feet. But Julian tied the two of them together tightly with a rope. I won't let you escape. Julian moved a delicate gift box from the trunk, opening it to reveal a snow mountain-shaped cake. I suddenly remembered that today was my birthday. Julian lit the candles, choking as he sang happy birthday. In 5 years of marriage, he had never even given me a good look, let alone celebrated my birthday. Every year, I coldly and quietly guarded a table full of food until dawn. Julian blamed me, but he didn't know that he had blamed the wrong person from beginning to end. The wind and snow suddenly rose, the candlelight flickering. Julian happily looked up. Ava, have you come back? As the candle was about to go out, I used my body to block the wind. No one responded to Julian. Serafina curled up in pain, her lips pale, clearly suffering from severe hypothermia. I stood in front of Julian. I watched him blankly blow out the candles, numbly and listlessly shoveling cake into his mouth. Large tears rolled down his face. Ava, won't you forgive me? I nodded. At some point, Buddy appeared in my sight. It happily ran towards me, jumping into my arms like it had countless times before. I hugged Buddy's neck tightly, blaming myself for not protecting it. But Buddy obediently licked my face, as if saying it's okay. Julian knelt in the snow, repenting. The ground trembled slightly, and large patches of snow began to collapse. Snow and wind swirled, and a blizzard spread at an extremely fast rate. Serafina screamed shrilly. No, I don't want to die. She frantically tore at the ropes, begging Julian to spare her life. But Julian just stared at her quietly and said softly, Serafina, this is what we owe Ava. She hates me. I want to apologize to her in person. Julian calmly closed his eyes, silently waiting for death. The blizzard was imminent, but the familiar sound of a whistle rang out not far away. Noah, leading a search dog, ran wildly towards Julian and grabbed his wrist, dragging him away. The roar of an SUV filled the air as Julian lay awkwardly on the car seat. They were racing against death. Julian excitedly beat on the car window, hoarsely shouting for Noah to let him out. I need to find Ava. She'll be scared if I'm not by her side. Julian's pale face was reflected in the car window. His wedding ring was stuck on his ring finger, congested to a purplish blue. But as if he couldn't feel the pain, he frantically raised his fist and smashed the car door. Noah roared in frustration. Can you stop it already? There are many ways to atone for your sins. Death is just your way of escaping. Serafina huddled in the corner, trembling, not daring to make a sound. The SUV stopped at the hospital, and Noah took Serafina to get checked out. Julian, however, sat in the passenger seat, and after a long silence, got out of the car. I floated beside him, my heart pounding uncontrollably. After following a familiar route, Julian pushed open his mother's door. His mother was still hugging a doll, smiling and listening to the nurse tell a story, but when she saw Julian, she fearfully hugged her head. The nurse impatiently got up to chase him away. Mr. Julian, please leave, don't agitate the patient further. Julian smiled bitterly, and took out the necklace Serafina had stolen from his pocket, humbly saying, I was mistaken last time. This necklace is hers, please help me return it to her. His mother saw the necklace and rushed over happily, impatiently asking the nurse to put it on her. Julian couldn't help but smile, a faint smile on his face. Then he turned and left. I reluctantly looked at my mother's thin face and hugged her tightly. Mom, Ava can't come to see you anymore. You have to listen to the nurses and eat and sleep on time. Mother and daughter were connected, and she stared blankly in my direction. She reached out her hand but didn't grab anything. Julian transferred most of his assets to my mother and sent Serafina, who was disabled in both legs, abroad. Never to see her again. Noah specifically instructed the cemetery keeper not to tell Julian the location of my tombstone. Warm sunlight shone on me and Buddy. My body gradually became transparent, and I hugged Buddy tightly for the last time, gently rubbing its head. Buddy, see you in the next life. Buddy licked my palm, and I took it as its agreement. A gust of wind blew by, and Ava and Buddy were gone from the world.